Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an official instructional and guidance video targeting the Oxford Brookes University Research and Analysis Project mentee engagement. Now, in this video, we are going to particularly focus on one aspect of choosing the company. The other aspect, which is related to primary research, has been looked at in a separate video, which you can check out using the playlist, of which the link is provided below. But in this particular video, we are going to talk about how, as a candidate who is hoping to start your work with regard to the OBU project, you're getting started, you've looked at the topics, you're considering industries and companies, then especially if you have a tendency to go for a secondary research intense topic, how can you select the company? That's going to be the core discussion. Let's get right to it. But before that, a gentle reminder to anyone and everyone, if you want to work with me as your mentor, I'm currently accepting mentees, and as a result, you can, as you know, I have a limited number of mentees that I work with. If you're interested, you can check out the link in the description section. You can fill out the form, provide the details, and for your email, you will receive a detailed instructional email with a lot of guidance and support as well in terms of getting started. And upon that, you can decide how to proceed as well. Okay. Let's take a look at the main content of this video. So I'm going to try and keep things casual and try and discuss as many things in detail as possible because this is quite important. A lot of the mentees who engage with the project or the OBU RAP initiative are candidates who take up secondary research. So ideally, of course, as usual, your first step is to reach at the point of having selected at least 2 to 3 topics. This is very important. You need to have shortlisted out of the 20 topics, at least 2 to 3 topics. And if you haven't checked it out, you can check out my video, the recent video I've created, which is titled How to Choose Your OBU RAP Topic. This will give you a lot of instructions and clear guidance about the process of arriving from 20 topics, from a moment of reviewing 20 topics to your final topic on which you might do the project. Now, if you have arrived this stage, then we can really talk about selecting the company. Now, the first thing you need to look at ideally is when you choose the topic, you have to identify if the topic requires primary research, which essentially means that you're going to do primary and secondary both. But the primary differentiator is that primary research will involve a first-person glance at the company, meaning that you're directly tapping and accessing the sources of information. So that is quite critical and not that easy as well, which is what I've looked at in detail in the primary research related video. Now, or else, of course, the other option is secondary research. And if your research effort is going to involve secondary research, this can lead to 3 scenarios. What are these scenarios? It should either be a company, right? If your selection of the topic is related to secondary research, then that research should be done on a company, which is either, the first scenario is, it should be from an industry where you have a preference toward. An industry, right? Not a company, but you're looking at it from an industry perspective. And we consider this approach to be a bottom-up. I'll explain why it's bottom-up as we go along. The second scenario could be that you don't have a particular industry or industries in mind, but you directly have in your mind a company. So you don't have to have an extra step of analyzing an industry first and then looking at a company. You may have an inclination toward a particular company in regard to the topic that you have selected. Or the third scenario that you can have is a top-down approach where the top is actually the topic. So you start from the topic and you try and drill it down below until you reach a selection or a decision about the company. We call this the top-down approach for various reasons. In this situation, you have no particular preference, you have no industry in your mind, you don't have any company in your mind. You have selected the company, your next step is to selecting the company. So you're going with a quite open mind in this particular scenario. So these are the three possible scenarios that you might be in. Let's take a look at each one of them, because each of these scenarios will have very, very different approaches to take. Okay. Now, if you have the first scenario, if that is the situation that you're facing, where you have a particular industry or industries in mind, then you should consider the following. On the first place, you should not have more than two, ideally more than two, but 2 to 3 industries at maximum in your mind. If you think that you have, if you say, for example, if you've taken a piece of paper and if you've written 5 industry sectors, technology, automobiles, aircraft engineering or aircraft, weapons, and agriculture, this is not the right way. You need to further shortlist and get this down. If it's one industry, all the better. That is what we are looking for. The first step is to try and point down or try and circle back into a particular or a singular industry sector. So try and shortlist if you have multiple industries. If you don't, all good. Now for each of these industry sectors, or ideally one industry, identify a list of companies based on the topic you have selected. Identify a list of companies based on the topic you have selected. For example, extract the worst performing companies in the industry for topic 4. You know that the fourth topic is about operational and business performance in a poorly performing company. So obviously in that industry sector, looking at the best performing companies for that topic is not going to be ideal. You need to, if your topic selection is topic number 4, then you have to try and use that topic, extract keywords from the topic, key criteria that will help you select what type of company you're looking for within that industry. Or another example, recent mergers and acquisitions within that industry for topic 19. If you have selected topic 19 as your topic, you know that you're going to analyze financial and operational consequences of a merger and an acquisition. Now in this regard, you will have to look at a potential merger or an acquisition that has happened 3 years ago. So if you have industry preference, then you need to look at a merger or an acquisition that happened within the past 3 years or before that, that you can use for your topic, because that's what is related to it. That's how you use the topic to develop a criteria that you can use to search for a company that will relate to what you're going to engage in. Then you need to conduct what I call basic research. You know, if you're engaging with me, there are 3 types of research aspects or research phases: initial research, basic research, and deep research. Now, initial research is obviously at the topic selection stage. Here at this stage, the company selection stage, you're going to engage with what we refer to as basic research. So this is quite simple. You're going to spend about 90 to at least 120 or 2 hours per company that you have shortlisted or identified on that industry, and a little bit of information in the industry, within the industry in general as well. So you need to, let's say, for example, you've decided that retailing is the company or the industry. Now within retail, you've selected, let's say, Sainsbury and Tesco as the 2 companies. So now what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to spend about a couple of hours on both of these companies, researching them. Basic research, reading about them, the main information, go into a couple of, mainstream financial news websites like Yahoo Finance or Bloomberg Finance, get the overview of the company, look at them very thoroughly. They have all the financials, ratios, news items, recent performance snapshots, etc. So you can spend about 1.5 hours looking at these figures to identify if what company may be the best or what company may be the most suitable. Now, during this basic research, let me give you a further set of hints of how you can improve the quality of the research. You can look at obvious sources of information and develop the ground level understanding about each company. That's what you can start with. Further, if I list a set of sources of information, you can look at annual reports, financial presentations, company publications, official websites, investor relations page, company news feed, share price history, and any major publications. So you don't have to do that in-depth reading, word-to-word reading that is required in the third and the final stage of research, the deep research. You just need to make sure that you go through all of these as much as you can from an overview sense to develop a important or proper foundational understanding about this company. In understanding, what can you understand about during this effort? You should be able to understand about the availability and the ease of access to information, because when you engage with that process, you will actually be able to understand if this is easy or not. If this company is something that is very elusive, it's very difficult to find information about them, or is it a company which has easily accessible information? Whether it's listed or not, markets of operations, where does it operate? Is it a global company? Is it a multinational at a different scale? Is it a conglomerate approach, or is it a conglomerate business or not? What kind of expansions, what kind of diversifications does it have? All kinds of things. Basic peer comparison metrics, because you need to establish that, and you can compare information in some of the mainstream news, financial news websites. So you can use those tools to easily, compare the share price history, compare ratios, and just see where everything's moving, and if everything is moving in the direction that you want them to, so that you can choose the company and do your project on. General financial and business performance, and what is the actual link to the topic? What is the critical rationale that you can use in justifying your selection of the company? Because in your second section, there is one sub-element in your report that you must write about justifying the choice of the organization. You have to have an excellent and valid rationale to why you chose that company. Simultaneously, throughout this entire process, you can develop a set of questions and clarifications that you need to get sorted with your mentor or with me as far as this entire basic research process is concerned. Based on all of these efforts, if you can arrive at a conclusion alone, then all the better. Or if you can bring the clarifications into main meeting 1, we discuss all of them, and finally you can finalize what company to proceed with before you move to the second phase. So that is how you can go about dealing with a situation where you don't have a particular company in mind, but you have an industry or industry sectors, 1 or 2 in mind. So this is how you can delve into using that as a beginning point to finalizing a company. That's the first scenario. Second scenario we are going to look at is, what if you're not looking at things from an industry perspective? What if you have a company or a couple of companies in mind? So obviously in this stage, then half of the work is done. Part of the work that we had in the first scenario is eliminated, because you're not thinking, I'm going to go for automobile, I'm going to go for engineering, I'm going to go for architecture. You're thinking, I'm going to go for Apple, or I'm going to go for General Motors or Tesla, or actually you'd be surprised. A lot of candidates, a lot of mentees tend to think of the same companies. It's unbelievable. Okay, so in this scenario, if you have a particular company or companies in mind, then what can you consider? First thing, obviously, is you shouldn't be walking into this process with 10 or 20 companies in mind. You need to shortlist them. Ideally, it should be a number at the maximum end, maybe 5. 5 is a difficult number. It's a very large frequency to deal with in this situation, but it's okay, right? Given the time. In fact, I would actually commend someone who is going to take the time and effort to go through 5 companies if they have that in mind. So ideally, minimum would be 3 companies, 2 to 3 companies ideally is a must, because one company, just researching one company is not a very good idea, because you need to have a perspective on how others are also doing in the industry. In any topic, that comparison provides you the room to benchmark yourself or your company, the company that you have selected, against peer performance, against industry averages. So if you are unable to do that, you are not really building a complete or holistic view on what's going on within the industry. So one company is definitely not a recommended point to start with in this stage. At least maybe 3 companies. For each of the company, you need to conduct basic research, which we slightly touched on earlier as well. In this process, you can look at obvious sources of information to develop the ground level understanding. You can look at the same sources of information I mentioned earlier: annual reports, financial presentations, publications by the company, official website, investor relations, company newsfeed, share price history, and other major publications. The idea is you develop a set of or a ground level foundational understanding on all aspects of the company or companies in terms of the practicality and the availability and the accessibility of information, whether it's listed or not, markets of operations, how those operations function, who is doing better, what regions are performing best, basic peer comparison metrics, general financial and business performance, actual link to the topic, because your topic will have a particular theme. It could be marketing, it could be HR, it could be IT, it could be change management, it could be internal audit, it could be internal controls, it could be mergers and acquisitions. So what is the rationale based on that theme do you have? That is important to be noted. And only at this stage, if you do sufficient amount of reading, you can develop a sufficient rationale. And that is important, because you know why you chose the company rather than blindly following. The world today is a place with many choices. Choices are like numerous. Same here. You have so many choices. You have nothing to fear in terms of, getting scared like, oh my God, will I have a company? Will I be able to select a company? Right? That's not the line of thinking here at all possible, because you have too many companies. If anything, it's like checking out Netflix. You don't know what to watch. There's just too much to watch. That's the situation you will face. So, which is not a bad position to be in. So, the rationale for selection, industry overview, industry position and rankings are all areas that you need to develop an understanding about. Simultaneously, you can, during this process, develop a set of questions about each of the company and bring them to main meeting 1 for our discussion. And if most of them can get clarified by yourself with the research itself, then all the better. And then we will hash out the remainder so that you can move forward with a clear mind. And finally, based on all of the above efforts, you can finalize your company and proceed to phase 2, which we will be discussing in the main meeting 1. So that is how the second scenario plays out. And ideally, you would have seen or you would have noted both the first and the second scenarios. First scenario being having an industry in mind, or the second scenario having a direct company or companies in mind, have very similar attributes to how you approach them, because those are what I call the bottom-up approach, where you're working backwards to the topic. You're trying to find a company that matches your topic's criteria, right? You're working backwards. Either you're first looking at the industry and working backwards, or you're looking at the company or companies and working backwards. Now, the third scenario is free mind. You have absolutely no tendency or inclination to select or go with a particular industry or company. Nothing. Open mind, clear mind. This is what you have in the third scenario. If you have only decided the topic and no particular industry or company preference, then you can consider the following. This is what I call the top-down approach, because everything begins with the topic. And you'd be surprised, many candidates take this approach. Here, you can break down the topic into key segments and extract the general theme and aim. So the first step is that you don't try to, do research on companies, industries, whatever. You take the topic, you break it down into pieces, you put it back together, you develop a great level of understanding of what this topic demands of you. What do they want? What are they asking you to look at? Now, for example, if you take a common topic like mergers and acquisitions, then you know that you have to select a merger or an acquisition. It has to have a certain time period that will make it eligible for your consideration. That time period has to have been sufficient for the post-merger effects to have taken place at least to a reasonable degree, so that you can do a pre and post-merger comparison. You know that you need to look at financial consequences. You know you need to look at operational consequences. So you understand all of these and put them all together and extract a general theme and aim. An aim. What are you hoping to? It's rather reflective of the topic itself. The topic has the aim in it, but you need to understand this, right? I'm quite familiar with them, but you may be someone who is just for the first time looking at this topic, and you may only last week have read the entire information pack and gone through the 20 topics and just have selected this topic. So make sure that you extract this. Conduct a Google search. After that, conduct a Google search looking for companies that match that theme and aim. For example, if I go with the same example, if I continue on that, if it's a merger and acquisition in the manufacturing sector, you know what your Google search at a very basic level can be. Major mergers and acquisitions to take place in the manufacturing sector in the United States during the past 5 years or in 2018 to 2020 period. That's it. You type that, you get a bunch of results. That's like a starting point of using the topic and what you extracted, the understanding of the topic, to use Google to work top down in order to find a company that matches the criteria. Develop a list of 5 to 10 companies that are listed, mainstream, and information heavy. This is very important. This is where secondary research plays a big role, because if you choose a company that is not mainstream, there is very likely a chance for information to get bogged down. There will not be a heavy level of reporting around that company. Not that you can't select them, but because it's secondary research, you need a lot of information. So one criteria is it should be mainstream. It should be listed, obviously, or else you won't even be able to find an annual report. And it should be heavy or with information. Only the basic research stage can give you this view, whether it's a company or whether these companies you have got as a result have these criteria. Are they mainstream? Are they listed? Are they information heavy on the internet and the public domain? For each of the company in the list, conduct basic research. So at least a couple of hours. It's ideal if you have 3 companies. That's we're talking about roughly 6 hours, 6 to 7 hours of work. You need to look at obvious sources of information and develop that ground level understanding. You can go through the same sources of information that I mentioned earlier in both the above cases: annual reports, company publications, official websites, investor relations feed, company news feed, share price history, major publications. And through this, you try and develop an understanding about the availability, ease, and practicality and access to information, whether it's listed or not, markets of operations, basic peer comparison metrics, general financial and business performance, and what is the actual link to the topic, what is the clear rationale which I mentioned about, etc. And simultaneously, throughout this process, you develop a set of questions and clarifications that you need to sort out with me or your mentor, and you bring them into, in my case, my main meeting 1. And ultimately, based on all of the above efforts and anything we clarify as well in our discussion, and sort everything out and arrive at a clear decision of, there we go, this is the company that I select. So this is how we work on choosing a company, finalizing an organization, and also in certain cases a peer, a relevant peer, because when you do that basic research as I outlined in either of the scenarios, you do or you are able to have a sufficient view on a comparison view as well to determine what may be a potential peer that you can select if the topic demands for a peer. So 3 scenarios we looked at. Couple of them bottom up, 1 top down. The first 2 is when you have a topic or an industry in mind, and the third scenario was when you have a clear mind, you only chose the topic. What next? What is the step that you need to take in order to choose a company that matches that topic? So I hope this video has been or will be helpful to you in determining the company, that it gives you a sense of, a framework, a more organized framework, but I've kept it very open-ended to give you the necessary freedom, because you bring in too many limitations, too many boundaries, and too many fences in that can cause problems to candidates, right? Because it feels like you're walking in a dungeon. No, we don't want to have that feeling. We want to feel, especially with secondary research, when you go into Google, it shouldn't look like, or it shouldn't be like, your mind shouldn't be like you're in a prison and you only have limited room to go. In secondary research, you should feel like you're in an open field. It's entirely open for you, and you're the one. You decide with your research. As your research develops, you decide how and where to build the fence, and you build those fences so that you bring a clear scope within the framework or within the overarching theme and aim of the topic. So I sincerely hope this has been helpful. Put it to good use. If you do contemplate thoroughly on this, and if you do understand thoroughly, then I'm sure you will be able to put this to good use. This has been developed. All of this content is being developed based on nearly 5 years of experience. So all the very best, and happy researching. A gentle reminder again, if you want to work with me, you know what to do. Link is below in the description. Just click on it and reach out. All the best. Good luck. Thank you. I'll see you around.